Welcome to the Alchematics CyberSEC Leaders Webinar Series. As many of you know, I'm your host, Richard Ritchie, founder and managing director of Alchematics. Now, as many of you know already, Alchematics is a niche executive search and recruitment firm focused on providing top talent to the IT channel industry across EMEA with a strategic focus on cybersecurity. Now, as part of our ongoing client and candidate value program, we're running the CyberSEC Leaders Webinar Series, which is really aimed at helping business leaders identify and attract key talent in the industry by discussing career objectives, trends, threats, and solutions with a variety of industry guests. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Nicolai Solling, Chief Technology Officer at Help AG, the Middle East's trusted security advisor. Say hello, Nicolai.
Hello.
Excellent. Listen, before we get started, Nicolai, or into the main conversation, which is predominantly about you and your experiences, I think it's important to mention that Help AG recently released a report covering the state of cybersecurity, or the status of the cybersecurity market in the Middle East. And I think it's a really interesting backdrop to the rest of the conversation. So, Nicolai, would you mind taking a moment just to walk us through or highlight, if you like, the key findings of this report, please?
Of course, and it is quite an interesting piece of research that we have released here. So in Help AG, we see a number of data points across our infrastructure and our customers' infrastructure as well, which we kind of try to tie together and then try to understand some of the cyber threats that we're seeing being active in the region right now. And on a yearly basis, we look at billions of events and try to make sense out of those. And there's a few key findings that we have identified. So first of all, one of the services that we operate is around distributed denial of service protection. So being able to protect organizations from being attacked on the internet by certain types of attacks. And here we saw a massive increase in the last year. I believe it was over 180% increase in the number of attacks. But what was also very key to understand was that the attacks were bigger and they lasted longer. And as organizations move their staff back home in their home offices, of course, the availability of services has been extremely important. Attackers are aware of that, and that's something we saw. Another thing which is also very dominant today is still, malware. A lot of organizations are being impacted. A lot of individuals are being impacted by malware. Malware actors, they have kind of changed tactics a little bit in the sense that we used to talk about ransomware and crypto ransomware or crypto malware, and that still exists, right? But they have upped their game a little bit. So before they start encrypting files on your machine, now they actually exfiltrate information out of the machine so that they could tell you, you know what, if you don't want to pay for getting your files unlocked, well, we're just going to publish it instead. So that's kind of like the other flip side of the ransom, right? And that's definitely happening. Ransomware and malware is by far the most dominant issue that's impacting both organizations as well as individuals.
It's typically done to I guess, solicit money in some form, right? It's not necessarily done as a publicity stunt. It's a business model to some extent, right?
Absolutely.
From a threat perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's actually some interesting YouTube videos of Eastern European police force that is actually going into a facility that's operating where some cyber attackers they're operating, and they apparently take out gold bars, right? So that it tells you something about how lucrative this kind of unfortunately, right? When we talk about the economy of cybersecurity, right? Unfortunately, the attacking side of cybersecurity or cyber has much more funds and capabilities than us who's trying to protect us against it. And that's always a little bit scary to think about. Obviously, also, as this is a setting of careers and, these things, it also means that I think cybersecurity as an industry and as a profession is something that we're going to be very, very, we're not going to be out of a job anytime soon.
That's good to hear. Good to hear for me also, because that's where we've taken a, you need to adapt as the market does, and that's why our strategic focus is cybersecurity, which is obviously why we created this series and why we're having these conversations. So it's good to hear. So look, let's start perhaps then with a little bit of background about yourself, Nicolai. Obviously, like you said already, you're the CTO at Help AG. Can you just give us a little bit of information? What does that involve?
Well, I was one of the early employees in the technical team within Help AG. So I've been with the company since 2008 and been part of the technical delivery arm for a very, very long period of time, and also taking care of building that specific organization.
Yeah.
And today, as the CTO, I focus a little bit more on some of the strategic initiatives within the organization when it comes to technology. So where do we move? Which kind of vendors do we work with? Which kind of technology do we work with? Which kind of problems do customers have? And then trying to identify what is our technical response to that.
Yeah. So your approach, I guess, is predominantly defined by what is the need in the market at the moment, right? What is the current top of mind challenges that your customers or even potential customers are facing, right?
Absolutely right. So there's a number of themes that our industry goes through, and that typically leads into an investment pattern and a requirements pattern for clients, where they will go in and focus on specifically dealing with these issues. And then, we need to make sure that we have the right services and also solutions to be able to address those requirements.
Yeah.
And that's what I spend a lot of time on.
So do you deal quite closely with the sales team or the team that's actually involved with clients, right? Because I guess these are the guys that are in the market feeding back this insight to you guys, right?
Yeah, both end clients, but also, of course, our sales guys. We constantly get requirements from clients that we're trying to deal with. And then, of course, there's also an element of and I think one of the areas that Help AG have been very successful is that we've managed to have a set of thought leadership where we could work as an advisor to clients on what were the things that they're going to look at down the line. And that's what I spend a lot of time on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading a report a few weeks ago from Hirschfeld, and they're one of the not necessarily trends, but the problems they anticipate companies facing in the coming months will be, obviously everyone's been working from home for the last year. Suddenly everyone's back in the office, and it's just this idea that all of these problems from a security point of view are now going to be, people are getting reconnected to the server or whatever in the office, and there's potentially a lot of problems on the horizon if that isn't if there isn't a strategy for doing that, right?
True. I think that the security models that we have in place today, some of them, of course, we had to change immediately due to the pandemic. But if we look long term and kind of understand that the way that we work right now is going to be a part of our life for a very, very long time, it's also going to be part of a business resiliency plan for organizations. Which means that this is not just a point in time. It's not just the last 18 months we were back home in the home offices. This is going to be a permanent thing, and that's going to change how we think about cybersecurity, and very much on the technical level on how do we enforce and how do we have the right kind of response capabilities to cybersecurity attacks. Yeah,
and I think you mentioned in a post recently, I think it might have even been today, yourself commenting on the fact that awareness is a key thing, right? And I think you guys at Help AG are doing a tremendous job in driving this awareness within your client network, but in the broader market as well, right?
Well, we spend a lot of time on social media, right? So I think we do try to make sure that our posts that we do on social media, the awareness that we bring to our clients as well, that is relevant information, and we try to really put focus on specific topics, and that's also one of the things I focus a lot on together with our very, very talented marketing team.
I think the quote that I remember from this morning was, "The problem starts behind the keyboard." Was that the quote? Something along those lines.
45 centimeters behind the keyboard, depending on how close you are on it, right? That's where most cybersecurity problems starts.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So look, tell us a little bit more about your career to date then, and what led to the movement between organizations. You've obviously been at Help AG now for, well, not obviously, you have been at Help AG for about 14 years.
Yes.
Obviously, there was a couple of movements before then, but tell us a bit about that. What has driven the decision to move between organizations, and then also to stay at Help AG for so long?
Yeah. So Help AG is by far the place that I've been working the longest, and I will also always look back on Help AG as the greatest professional achievement in my life. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's been a phenomenal experience, and it still is a phenomenal experience to be part of the success of Help AG.
Yeah.
Before that, I think I was fortunate enough to be kind of taken by a wave. I was at the right places at the right time. When I started out in IT, most of the education system were not really geared up delivering a proper education for IT. So you could do certain kind of very academic educations in that space, but I really didn't have time for that. I was like your typical geek in school that played around with computers since I was very, very young, and then at some point of time I really just started seeking that as a career, and started off as a normal engineer on the floor, doing basic maintenance of printers and computers, and installation with 3.5-inch floppy drives, and all of these things that many of the people coming into the industry right now would not remember, right?
Yeah.
And then from there on, I think I had a few lucky breaks. I was involved in a graduate training program with one of the very large vendors in the space, Cisco Systems. That's not a big secret that I was there for a number of years. And then after that, I actually dialed in on security very, very early on, and worked on both the Cisco security portfolio, but then of course also later on I got exposed to a much bigger part of the industry. And then finally, before joining Help AG, I was system engineering manager in Juniper Networks, and after that I then joined Help AG. Actually, a little bit by coincidence, I was on vacation in Dubai and met the founders of Help AG here, because they were a big Juniper partner down here, and then one thing led to the other, and I think 6 months after I was in Dubai.
Excellent. So you just by chance you were on holiday in Dubai and decided, well, if there's an opportunity here and it's shining a lot, I guess the sun shines more here than in Denmark. That's where you're from originally, right?
The weather system is, I would say, in the summer I still prefer Denmark,
Yeah.
but there's nothing that beats Dubai in the winter.
Yeah, 100%. I have a similar assessment when I think of the weather back in the UK. I think in the UK, summer was on a Wednesday last year.
Well, the weather systems in the UK and Denmark are not too unlike. Sorry, they're pretty alike.
Quite right. Okay, so how have you seen the cybersecurity industry change over the last 12 to 18 months? And if we kind of bring things more up to date now.
Many areas. First of all, customers are moving much more towards our service, getting technology through services. So that's also what we see in Help AG. So our managed security services field is by far the quickest growing team within Help AG, and that's because customers, they want to move away from having responsibility of platforms themselves. Also, one thing that's important to understand is that when you buy technology, you actually end up having technology debt, if you can kind of say that, in the sense that you need to kind of make that investment back. And with services, that's very different, right? So with services, you have the option of potentially moving out of that specific service if you wanted to, if it's not good enough, or if there's something else that you need, and you also have the ability of scaling up and down. And that's what we see a lot of clients really requesting right now, and also what we have built up our organization to do since actually 2014, when we started in this managed services space.
So now you defined, or the company is defined, if you like, as the trusted security advisor, but is the managed securities services component of the business, is that the major part of the business, or is that just one arm of it, if you like?
It's one arm. At the end of the day, we deliver
Yeah.
It's an abused word, holistic, but what we try to do is to make sure that we deal with information from cradle to grave. First of all, identifying the information and what is sensitive information. How do you protect it? How do you operate that information, right? Because at the end of the day, you can kind of say that cybersecurity is just a subset of a broader term called information security. So that's what we focus on.
Yeah. Okay, great. It's just interesting to get your take on something, because obviously over the last 12 to 18 months, with obviously the rush to digitally transform organizations, they're obviously exposing themselves to greater cyber threats, let's say. We're speaking to the chief solution architect at AWS towards the end of last year, and Merit Bayer, and she was saying that one of the key differentiators of cloud is security. I'm just interested to get your take on that, because I've spoken to a number of, for example, managed service providers that obviously cater to this transition, and they don't actually pitch it as such. So I'm just interested to get your take on it.
Well, I think if you look at the cloud services as them at their core, right? If you look at AWS, Azure, and all of these things, the services themselves are secure, right? So don't get me wrong, right? Microsoft and AWS, they have very, very capable security capabilities within their environments, but it's the environments that are secure. The stuff that you put onto those environments, you still have to secure yourself, and that's probably very often a misunderstanding. In general, when you say digital transformation, what you also say is that there will be more dependency on those specific systems that's powering that digital transformation. And that means that there will also be more risk to the organization if you don't get security right. And that's the reason why when when I talk about digital transformation, I always say that security is a day zero job. If you do digital transformation without thinking about really your cybersecurity impact and how do you deal with the risks of that specific platform, you potentially end up disrupting your business, right? And that's not what you want with transformation.
No, quite right. You want to be moving forward for sure.
True.
Okay, so if we kind of look at the other lens now, how do you anticipate things will change over the next 12 to 18 months? And can you give us some examples of, how you think the market will change? I know, for example, one thing I wanted to make sure we did cover today, I read an article of yours recently, and that talked quite in depth about the idea of cyber insurance.
Yeah.
I'm just interested to understand, part of the evolution of cybersecurity industry, what role does cyber insurance have, and how, just give us some context around that, please.
Yeah. So cyber insurance is, I think many organizations will pick that up in the coming months and years, right? Because they're going to start thinking about this at the same way that you think about a fire insurance for your house or for your office space or whatever it is, right? You're going to think about cybersecurity being something that you can insure yourself out of. Quite interestingly, there's actually one of the large insurance companies in the world. They just recently announced that ransomware will no longer be covered by their cybersecurity insurances because it's such a big problem, right?
Is that just because there's no? Is that in itself recognizing that? I was going to say cybersecurity is a lost cause. That's not what I meant to do. But what I mean is you have to recognize, I guess, to some extent that cybersecurity is something we should all pursue, of course. But the reality is to be 100% cyber secure is almost impossible to some extent, right? Given the rapid pace at which the market is evolving.
It's definitely a recognition of the fact that specifically ransomware is an extremely complex issue to validate if you're actually secure against it or not. And many organizations, as part of an insurance policy creation, right? It's difficult difficult to assess how good is the company at protecting themselves against ransomware. And that's one of the reasons why probably these things have been written out of the policies. And it's of course also impacting the industry that there's so many examples of ransomware.
Yeah, I guess it would impact the willingness to take up ransomware, to take up cybersecurity insurance as well. Because if ransomware is the key risk, if the insurance no longer protects you against it, then what's the point in having the security to some extent?
I'm speaking out of that's just my personal opinion. I kind of agree with you. that many organizations have been buying these cybersecurity insurance policies in order to protect them against ransomware. And we have to understand this. This was announced last week. I don't know specific details. I only read about it in the press.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic. So certainly one to keep an eye on, especially if companies look to where are they going to invest, put their money and resources over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and then maybe just to I think you asked me to cover a little bit what's going to happen in the next 18 months.
Yeah, please,
I think data and privacy of data is going to be two of the things that we're going to be discussing a lot, both in the enterprise settings, but definitely also on the in the setting of consumers. So us as digital citizens, we're going to start thinking much more about the data that we create when we utilize applications as something that we should maintain control over, and the custodians of that data that we create, we're going to have much more requirements to them. Just look at the outcry from the users of WhatsApp when WhatsApp started to change some of their privacy policies, where they were downloading Signal and Telegram and all sorts of other things in the hope that this would be more private, and that actually I think is the first indication that the more educated consumer is starting to come in the market. And of course that impacts enterprises, because they need to make sure that all of their services is aligned to those kind of consumer requirements.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. It's a bit of a minefield as far as the consumer is concerned, right? So I guess we have to make sure that companies are, I guess, being ethical, reliable, and protecting us, because it's almost too big a task for us to protect ourselves. Not that we want to walk into a new sign up somewhere naively, but there's so much to know. It's impossible for a normal consumer to be aware of everything, right? So we need the liability, I guess, needs to be on the enterprise.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, fine. So looking ahead to the future again. So now, what I'm interested to understand is, what do you see as the single greatest challenge for the industry currently, and how do you feel that challenge may be overcome?
So first of all, I think since we're talking about skills and careers and capabilities of individuals, I think that's one of the areas that we are. The industry as a whole is very challenged around. We always talk about how there's millions of cybersecurity professionals missing in the industry, and over the next years, as we do more and more digital transformation and as cybersecurity and being able to maintain the security and availability of those digital transformation platforms increases, we're just going to need more and more people. And at the same time, we also have a dramatic increase in the number of threats, right?
Yeah.
So looking at the perspective of human resource and individuals that are able to drive these capabilities, that's going to be a key challenge to the industry moving forward.
So what do you think then would be the tougher things to recruit for in cybersecurity? You obviously mentioned skills, experience, perhaps tools exposure, but given your experience, what you do, because I'm sure you're involved in a lot of the hiring within your organization, perhaps maybe at the final stages, of course. But what are the things that you find are the hardest, perhaps, skills to come across, or even experiences? Because I understand from conversations I've had with others within the network that, if you work for a company that has been hacked, or there's been a malware issue, or any of these big problems, that experience is great, but it's not necessarily experience you can always put on a CV, because it's
I'm not certain you want that experience in the first place, right? Because it means that you went through a very troublesome time to get that experience, right? So
it does, but it means you've learned something hopefully along the way. But just interested to know, from your experience, what from a recruitment perspective, what are the things that you find are just missing in the market? There's always this talk about skill shortage, but what skills are we talking about here?
Yeah, true. So I think, first of all, many of us, including myself, right? I'm the first to say that as well, right? We went through the vendor certifications and we got really good knowledge about a specific vendor's product. And, I was fortunate enough to work for some of the vendors that were really dominating in that field, and they just shoved certifications and training down my throat, right? So I was very quickly very highly certified in the field that I was in, and that was good. But I got their view of the world, right? And if I look at skill sets that I require today in our organizations, it's really much more about people who have really broad understanding of the problems that we're facing, really down to the technical details of the inner workings of how an Active Directory environment is working, as an example, right? Or in DevOps and in cloud computing, right? Having the right skill set and exposure to be able to go out and work with clients in this space. That is skill sets that is very, very difficult to achieve from just a let's call it vendor certification. You need to really have your hands dirty and play around with it, and that's probably also why I think the curiosity in individuals and burning midnight oil trying to get your Docker environment to work. I think that's a very, very good experience. And if you're not willing to do that, cybersecurity will be a challenging place to work in.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting point you make about the curiosity, the need to work through challenges, problems to broaden your understanding of platforms and what have you. But I guess the challenge is from a recruitment perspective. How do you quantify this, or how do you even prove it?
True.
Other than saying yes, I'm curious about cybersecurity. How would you?
Exactly.
How would you even qualify that in an interview setting?
In all honesty, right, sometimes when I recruit, the skill sets that I require within the organization, I might not even be able to quantify if the person that I'm talking to knows something about that or not, because it's a very specific skill set that I would not even be exposed to, right? Yeah. And that's where I think that's one of the secret sources. Obviously, Helbig as an organization, we're now, I think, 280 people, right? So we have a very broad set of skills across the organization, and I'm able to pick out those subject matter experts to help me in identifying those specific skill sets. But it is definitely a challenge, but it's also where recruiters come in, and that's to identify that kind of talent set. Yeah,
quite right. So as an organization in the cybersecurity industry, what do you believe are the key factors in attracting great talent? So put aside the interview part, which we were just discussing. I mean, from Helbig's perspective, what do you do at Helbig that would attract people to you?
I think first of all, everyone in the office, everyone in the company knows what our mission is. So we all get up at work in the morning to do something, right? We have a specific mission for the company, and we're very clear on that, right? Everyone in the company knows that they are not just a number, so they are really appreciated as individuals, and then of course also that I think it's an interesting industry to work in, right? It's so your job is challenging, the problems that you're dealing with is challenging, and it's really something that, at least for me, is highly motivating, right? And then finally, let's be honest, right? I have great friends in my work environment, right? I spend a lot of time with my colleagues, and it's a great experience to go to work.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think one of the challenges, if you like, over the last 12 months, especially as companies have still recruited people remotely over the last 12 months, is how do you give people access to this culture when they can't access it until they're back in the office,
You know what? I'll top you on that. We integrated two companies together during the pandemic, right? So we were acquired by Etisalat on February last year, Etisalat Digital, and of course integrated different kind of business functions, right? And I think we've been very successful in creating that, even though, I have many colleagues that I've never met before in physical. Obviously the platforms we have available today is good, but I'm really, really looking forward for that next company kickoff where I can go and shake hands with people and say hello, or maybe we're still going to be fist bumping, but just being able to spend time with all of my new colleagues, that's going to be great.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite funny. So I attended GITEX last November, December, and it was quite funny. The number of companies that I met from Europe, that there were teams of say 3, 4, 5 people, and it was the first time these employees had met. GITEX was the first time they'd actually been a requirement for them to be in the same place.
True.
Which is actually quite, yeah, it was quite funny, the dynamic at play there. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So one of the things that we did, which was, good, is that we put, we didn't used to have pictures on our company directory, but now everyone has to have a picture on their company directory.
For sure.
That's something like, low tech, but very, very important for us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like you say, it's those little things that make a difference, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so back to you personally then for a moment, Nicolai. What do you, obviously you've been in the industry for a long, long time, right? So what do you do to keep on top of your personal development in such a rapidly evolving space?
A number of things. I listen to a number of podcasts. So podcasts have been increasingly an important source of information for me about the cybersecurity industry and some of the topics that we deal with. So I have a list of specific podcasts. I'll be happy to share them as well. But every single day I listen to something called SANS Internet Stormcast. You can find it on Apple and other podcast platforms, right? And they give you kind of a brief of what's happening regarding vulnerabilities, malware, threat actors, and these kind of things. It's a 10-minute podcast with really great content. Every morning, that's what I start with when I'm dropping my kids off to school, and then
I'm sure they love it.
Well, they don't listen to it; it's on the way home.
All right,
on the way in, I listen to Disney songs.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, so I'm not there with the Disney songs yet, but when I drop my child off at my friend's every other week, I find I'm obviously listening to nursery rhymes on the way there, and on the way back, I'm still singing along to them, wondering what am I doing?
The song from the theme song from Frozen.
Yeah.
Anyway, it has an expiry date in my head for sure. Anyway, so podcast very important. Then I have a number of websites that I follow. So there's something called Dark Reading, which is against like a digest of cybersecurity information. And then finally, there's a number of conferences that I attend in. So right now, if I look a little bit tired, it's because I was up until 4 o'clock this morning, catching up on events from the RSA conference that's going on in virtually, right? But typically I would be at RSA conference in San Francisco every year, and I have been that for the last many years. That's a really, really good week where you get to work with vendors, and you also get to hear a little bit from the stuff that's not just industry. So those are some of the things that I do, and then I generally, again, also one of the things that I miss a lot working remotely is the ping pong with the subject matter experts in the office. But these things will normalize again, of course.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to a client a few weeks ago, and they were saying one of the things they missed about working remotely is often it's the incidental conversations you have with people in coffee shops near to your place of work. Sometimes that's where the business gets done as well.
Yeah, that's true. The water cooler discussions are sometimes the best.
Yeah, definitely. So just a couple of other things before we close there, Nicolai. Just interested to see again, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or perhaps, obviously you're not going to say running my own business or not working for HelpAG. So perhaps where do you see HelpAG then in the coming 5 years as the company evolves? Because I know you guys are on a rapid recruitment drive at the moment.
Yeah. So first of all, we would have strengthened our position in the Middle East. I think we have a very strong position in the UAE, but of course we have desire for other things in KSA. We're growing very, very rapidly right now, and we of course have ambitions to grow outside of that. So that's very important for us. I think we will be much more focused on delivering HelpAG as a service. That's something our CEO, Stefan Berner, very often talks about, that customers, they will not buy a firewall anymore in the future, right? They will buy a protection service from HelpAG. And if that is then delivered as a cloud-based service that we operate, or if it's something that's on-prem at the client, that's actually the abstraction layer that we have the luxury of being able to deliver to clients. So I think that engine room around how do we build services will be extremely important for us moving forward. And then I'm going to have a lot more colleagues. Organization will double, triple, I don't know. But, of course, in order to build those kind of things and in order to deliver on those ambitions, we need a lot more skilled individuals joining the organization.
Definitely. Look, one final question then in closing, Nicolai. Do you have any advice for anyone out there who's either considering moving into cybersecurity or just looking to, take the next rung up the ladder, so to speak?
Well, first of all, I think it's about understanding where do you want to be in the where do you want to be in your career? What is it that you want to focus on? Do you want to have a technical career? Do you want to have a more commercial angle to cybersecurity? Obviously, we have skilled salespeople and these kind of things, but it's a different set of skills that you need as a sales individual as you need as a technical person, and being able to identify where's your strength. I believe a lot in focusing on the strength of an individual instead of trying to fix weaknesses. So early on, try to identify what you're good at, and then just keep learning. Right? It's cybersecurity is a diverse field with a lot of development happening in, and keep learning, and don't be afraid of burning midnight oil and trying to educate yourself. Don't expect that the industry will just educate you. Yes, as Help AG, we will give specific individuals specific skills if they need that for training, but I'm expecting everyone to be motivated and to be able to deliver on that promise of being good at your job.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's there's a couple of key things in there what you just said for me. One is the idea of working on your strengths. 100%. I mean, I've been working with a coach for the last few years, and her recommendation has always been, identify what your strengths are and pursue a career or life adhering to those strengths, because you'll be a lot more fulfilled when you do that. And then the second thing you mentioned is that having that, the personal responsibility to look after your own future, right? Your own personal development. I learned a long time ago when I was back in the UK. I used to work as a contractor consultant, and what I learned back then, I mean, we used to get paid a lot more than employees that we were sitting next to, by virtue of the fact that we were always on a 5-day notice period, right? This is the life of a contractor. But what I learned back then is that there's no security in being employed. Security comes through being employable. And in order to be employable, you need to, like you say, look after your personal development and get those skills as you go along.
Yeah, spot on.
Excellent. Listen, Nicolai, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So listen, guys, I hope you all enjoyed listening. Also, a recording of this session will be made available on the Alcon Maddox website, which is just alconmaddox.com/webinars in the next couple of days. It'll also be available on our LinkedIn page, so please follow us for updates. And we'll be back again next month with another CyberSEC leader. If you'd like to join us in future sessions, as a speaker that is, please email me directly at richard@alconmaddox.com. Also, if your company needs help in resourcing top cybersecurity talent, then again, please reach out to me directly, richard@alconmaddox.com, and my team and I'll be more than happy to help. Thanks very much for your time, guys. Nicolai, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.
And have a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.